Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in that long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed!" There was a pause, then smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushing the ceiling wouldn't hit it. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could ya?" It had not been an easy journey. He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you little great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "Ah, and here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetly eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you were only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you got your mum's eyes." I'm aware that my Hagrid voice has changed since Chapter 1. We're just going to roll with it. We're not going to talk about it. Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right just the same." From an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box out of it. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way out of his mouth, and what he said instead was, "Excuse me, who are you?" The giant chuckled. "Ha ha, true, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about the tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. I'd not say no to something stranger if you've got it in mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shoveled chip bags in it and snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing when he drew back a second later. There was a roasting of fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering lights, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy bag of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid that he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great puddin' of a son doesn't need fattening any more. Dursley, don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was hungry. He had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything he said, "I'm sorry, but I really don't know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does, and I told you, I'm the keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You know all about Hogwarts, don't you?" No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry?" Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them as he should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't know about Hogwarts for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" said Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to be filled the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "You mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. I know some things, he said. I can, do math and stuff. But Hagrid simply waved his wand and said, About our world. I mean, your world. My world. Your parents' world. What world? Harry looked as if he was about to explode. Dursley! He boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must know about your mom and dad, he said. I mean, they're famous. You're famous. What? My mom and dad weren't famous. Were they? You don't know. You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You don't know what you are, he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop, he commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell this boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his eyes, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him. Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you kept it from him all these years. Kept what from me? Harry said eagerly. Stop! I forbid you! Yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a grasp of horror. Go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. There was a silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. And a thumping good 'un, I'd wager. Once you're trained up a bit, of course. With a mum and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. Harry Potter, the floor, hut, on the rock and sea, and under the stairs, and pulled it out and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederate of the Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Hey, they left that line out. But I'm Harry, just Harry. And for those who are wondering who I'm talking to on YouTube, I'm reading this on Twitch, so there's a chat. But I elected not to put it on the screen because I think it's better to just immerse yourselves in the reading. Okay, back to the book now. Actually, let me take a sip of some water. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, What does it mean they await my owl? Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me, said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl. A real live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible, hope you're well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back, sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid, but at that moment Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk like him. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took it in we'd put a stop to this rubbish, said Uncle Rubbish. Yeah, Uncle Vernon is rubbish. Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew, said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard? Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be? My dratted sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared after that. that school, and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who knew her for what she was, a freak. But my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were so proud of having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw a breath, and then went ranting on. It seemed she had been wanting to say this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash! Car crash?" roared Hagrid, jumping so angrily that the Dursleys scattered back to their corner. "How can a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage! A scandal! Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in the whole world knows his name?" Yeah, that might have peaked a little bit. I'll sit a little further back from the mic. "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea, when Dumbledore told me, there might be some trouble getting a hold of you. But how much I didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't get off to Hogwarts not knowing." He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. "Well, it's best you get to know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it." He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible you don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows." "Who?" asked Harry. "Well, I don't like saying the name if I can't help it. No one does." "Why not?" asked Harry. "Gulp and garboils, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was a wizard who went bad. As bad as you can go. Worse than worse. His name was..." Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "I can't spell it." "All right. Voldemort." Hagrid shuddered. "Don't make me say it again. Anyways, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got 'em too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power. 'Cause he was getting power, all right. Dark days, Harry. Dark days. No one to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed him. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore, the only one you know who was afraid of, didn't dare try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mum and dad were as good as a witch and wizard could be, and I never knew anyone nicer. Head boy and head girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is you know who never tried to get 'em inside there before. Probably because he knew they were close to Dumbledore, and he didn't want anything to do with that dark side of power. Maybe he thought he could persuade 'em. Maybe he thought he just wanted 'em out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you all were living, on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with the sound of a foghorn. "Sorry," he said. "But it's just that sad, knowing your mom and dad, nicer people you couldn't find anywhere. You know who killed him. And then this is the real mystery of the thing. He tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then, but he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Touches your mom and dad, too, and your house even. But it didn't work on you. That's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one, except you. And he killed some of the best witches and wizards ever. The McKinnons, the Bones, the Prewets. And you was only a baby, and you lived." Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw the flash of green light again, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cool, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. "Took you from the ruin house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought you to this lot." "Loads of old trash," said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid and his fists were clenched. "Now you listen here, boy," he snarled. "I accept there's something strange about you, and probably some good beating wouldn't have cured. And as for your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it, and the world's better off without them in it, for my opinion. Asked for all they got. Getting mixed up with those wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end." But at that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa, drawing a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat, pointing it at Uncle Vernon like a sword, and he said, "I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word." In danger and fear of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. "That's better," said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask. Hundreds of them. "But what happened to Sorry, I mean, you know who?" "Good question, Harry. Disappeared, vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, you see. He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go?" "Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time. I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of kindness, some of them came out of trances. Don't reckon they could have done it if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere, lost in his powers, too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was, no one does, but something about you stumped him all right." Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been something, a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be a wizard? He was just Harry. He'd spent his whole entire life being clouded by Dudley and bullied by his aunt and uncle. If he really was a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into warty toads every time they tried to lock him in the cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? "Hagrid," he said quietly, "I think you must have mistaken me for someone else. I don't think I can be a wizard." To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. "Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you were scared or angry?" Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that ever happened around his aunt or uncle was whenever he was furious with him. And Harry, he had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he somehow found himself out of their reach, dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut he managed to make it grow back, and the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't even got his revenge without ever realizing he was doing it. Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. "See?" said Hagrid. "Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts." Taking a sip of some water, hang on. "See you later, Kitomato. Thanks for coming by, man." But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. "Haven't I told you he's not going?" he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish. Spell books, wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world, 7 years there, and he won't be known by himself of what you've labeled him as. He'll be with the greatest headmaster ever to live, Albus Dumbledore." I went with the movie quote instead of what they wrote because I liked it better. And then let me sit back for this one because he's going to yell. "I am not paying for him going to some crackpot old school to teach him magic tricks," yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella in a whirl over his head, and he said, "Never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me again." He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to a point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back to them, Harry saw a Curly's pigtail poking from the hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one terrified last look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. "Shouldn't have lost my temper," he said ruefully. "But it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig. But I suppose he was much like a pig anyway, so there wasn't much left to do." He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. "Be grateful if he didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts. Strictly speaking, I'm not allowed to do magic. I was allowed to do a bit follow you here and get your letters to and stuff, but one of the reasons I was so keen to take the job was that." "Why aren't you supposed to do magic?" asked Harry. "Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got expelled, to tell you the truth, in my 3rd year. They snapped me 1 in half and everything, but Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore." "Why were you expelled?" "It's getting late, and we've got lots to do tomorrow," said Hagrid loudly. "Gotta get up to town, get you all your books and that." He took off his thick black coat and threw it over to Harry. You can keep warm under that," he said. "Don't mind if it wriggles a little. I think there's a couple of dormice in 1 or 2 of the pockets."